Combat rating has changed. I'm going to explain in this video how combat rating has changed. I'm currently in Hell 5 difficulty. Now, Hell 5 difficulty used to be approximately 5,000 combat rating, but if you look now, it's 3,700 combat rating. You can see I'm 5,500 higher combat rating at 8710. That is because the overall combat rating requirement of the different Hell difficulties in the overworld, meaning when you're just in your normal map here, you're not in a dungeon, etc., have been massively decreased. Across the board, Hell difficulty combat rating requirements have been pushed down. This is going to do two things. This is going to make climbing through the Hell difficulties easier when it comes to when you're being able to farm the overworld or the map in Jimro. And it's also going to allow the people that were stuck at lower combat ratings to be able to get themselves to the higher combat rating difficulties much easier and quicker. Something you're going to notice is that the combat rating requirement for dungeons is actually higher. Now I only have 4,285 bonus combat rating. That means it is 800 combat rating higher to be inside a Hell 5 dungeon than it is to kill minions from Hell 5 outside of a dungeon. That means Hell 5 difficulty is approximately 3,705, but the Hell 5 difficulty dungeon is about 4,500 combat rating. This is a change from previously when on the last patch, the dungeons and the overworld, the normal map combat rating for minions would have been the same. This is true for all difficulties as Hell 6 is 6,175 combat rating for the map. However, it is just under 7,000 combat rating for the dungeon. Again, just about 800 combat rating higher the dungeons are than the overworld. This means by the time that you unlock the next combat rating required for the map, and now you're dead even with the normal minions on the map, you still need to get 800 more combat rating if you wish to be able to participate and actually do something within the dungeons of that same difficulty. This means that once you actually get to the overworld and you start farming legendary items, you're going to need about 130 more combat rating per spot in order to be able to get to the point where you can start contributing to unlock your set items. This isn't a hard requirement, as dungeons you can get carried and find a party and get set items before you're able to contribute to the dungeon or to give you your bonus combat rating. But let's assume you're playing solo or you can't get into a dungeon unless you can contribute and have good enough combat rating. In that case, you're going to need to get 130 more combat rating on average per piece of equipment in order to be able to get above the required combat rating. Keep in mind, none of this will actually include stats gained from getting additional demonic remains, leveling up your Heliquary, Warband Tableau, etc., strictly from the new Hell gear, so you can remove some of that if you're doing other things. Now, the combat rating system itself has actually changed. You're going to notice from combat rating that you no longer get a maximum of 22%. Now, the increased damage you deal maximum is 10% and decreases all damage you can take by a maximum of 9%. Against players, you cannot gain more than 10% damage increased or reduction. So in PvP and PvE, the maximum bonus from combat rating is now identical. So effectively what they have done is, lowered the floor so that it's easier for most people to get the combat rating required, but they've also lowered the ceiling so that the massive combat rating advantage people have over other people isn't as large anymore. This means the meta has now shifted. While it used to be that effectively the meta was something like this, you would join a new Hell difficulty, let's say you joined Hell 5 or Hell 4, let's just say Hell 5 here, then you would farm set items first, as set items are not based upon Paragon, and keep in mind, they are still not based upon Paragon. This is no longer what you're going to do, as the set items acquiring these do not require the same combat rating anymore. The dungeons are more difficult. So now what you're going to do is hit the new difficulty combat rating requirements, for instance 3,700 approximately. Now you're going to farm the map. So you're going to go farm the map and you're going to go get approximately 130 combat rating per piece of gear times 6, because there's 6 spots of gear, which is going to give you just approximately over 840. It will give you about 840 combat rating bonus over where you were, which would then allow you to do the dungeons at an even combat rating, and then you get your set items. The set items, again, are not based upon Paragon, but the legendary items are. So if you get these in the beginning, you farm your set items, then you go back and farm your legendary items again, sort of like this, which will allow you to get higher combat rating, which then after that, eventually you'll have high enough combat rating that you'll break the cycle and you'll go on to the next, which would be House 6, and then you sort of repeat this whole process over again. If you didn't follow any of that, you don't need to. All you need to know is when you unlock a new difficulty, go farm the map and then farm the dungeons next. You can always just try to get into a group and have people carry you, but you will have an 800 combat rating deficit if you just unlock the new difficulty and just now are even with the new hell difficulty. There's 800 combat ratings of gains to make up, just due to the way the new system works. Either way, you're going to want to make sure you get your guaranteed set item from the new hell difficulty once you unlock it. It only requires 3 dungeons, so try to party queue your way into doing 3 dungeons. This can stack up to 3 times, meaning once every 3 days, you need to run 9 dungeons, and these will automatically give you a huge bump in combat rating. And don't forget, as you're unlocking these higher combat rating difficulties like Hell 6, etc., you still have to go to the Challenge Rift and unlock the equipment from things like Challenge Rifts, Elder Rift, Psycho Strife, and the vendors, etc. by completing the corresponding Challenge Rift. If you don't do this, you won't unlock the gear its entirety all the way around the game. And to unlock the higher difficulties, now you must clear through these Helliquary bosses to unlock the corresponding difficulty. For instance, if I want to unlock House 7, I'm going to need to beat the highest tier House 6 boss from the Helliquary, which is fine in my own opinion because these are massive bonuses to combat rating. If you actually end up doing these Helliquary raids, you really want to do these now. They're a big deal. Now, as you're leveling your combat rating, you might wonder to yourself, what am I going to do with my old equipment? Well, obviously the legendary gear you can salvage, but your set items you actually want to salvage as well and take your Fable Wisps that you have. Let's say you have Hell 2 ones, trade them in for Hell 3, the 1 to 5 rate, 3 to 4, the 1 5 rate, etc. Slowly trade up your equipment as you unlock it, and maybe by the time you get to the Hella difficulties, you get like 1 extra or 2 extra pieces. I've only got a couple extra pieces from trading up my previous equipment, but every time you go to the next difficulty, typically you can get a small bump there as well. Now, the largest jump in combat rating, Hell 5 to Hell 6, if you take a look here, it actually is 2,700, and then if you're going to go from Hell 7 Hell 6 to Hell 7 here, you're going to notice the combat rating is going to jump 2,700. Hell 7 to Hell 8, it's going to jump another approximately 2,400. So the largest jumps are actually from Hell 6 to Hell 7 is going to be the biggest bottleneck. So while technically combat rating is a little bit less important now, it is still required to do basically everything in the game, and it is still required for the dungeons. However, factually, combat rating is lowered. Even though the dungeons are 800 combat rating higher, and people are saying the dungeons are more difficult, they're still 800 combat rating higher than a lower amount that they used to be just for the map alone. So everything is technically a little bit easier now. That plus the change to things like Helliquary mean you're going to be chewing through each individual difficulty a little bit quicker than you were prior. For that reason, don't worry as much in min-maxing your sets, etc., as much as just getting the combat rating to get to the next hell difficulty, because you're going to be working through the difficulties pretty quick. It's not going to be till you get to more where the server Paragon level is at that it's time to sit down and you're sort of waiting between hell difficulties. So the TLDR in terms of what's actually going to change for you is instead of every time you get to a new combat rating difficulty like Hell 5, Hell 6, etc., instead of farming sets first, farm some of the overworld first, because it's going to be a little bit easier. Then once you've gained a few pieces, you've got some combat rating up, then go farm your sets, and then go back to farming the overworld once you have your set bonuses due to that combat rating change difficulty. If this video interested you, consider liking the video if you liked it, subscribe if I earned it. If I didn't, no big deal. I'll try to earn it on the next one. Love you all. Thank you for watching.